Chapter 9. A Midnight Feast. It was dark when Sara reached the square where the seminary was situated. As she passed the Indian gentleman's house, she could see the usual bright fire glowing in the grate, and the Indian gentleman bundled up in shawls in an armchair in front of it. His head was resting on his hand, and he looked as lonely and as unhappy as ever. When Sara entered the seminary through the servants' entrance, she ran into Miss Minchin, who had come downstairs to scold the cook. "Where have you been wasting your time?" she demanded of Sara as soon as she saw her. "You've been out for hours." "It was so wet and muddy that it was hard to walk," Sara replied calmly. "My shoes are so worn out that I kept slipping." "Make no excuses," snapped Miss Minchin, "and tell no lies." Miss Minchin stalked back upstairs, and Sara went into the kitchen. The cook had just experienced Miss Minchin's hot temper too. She was in a terrible mood as a result. Sara was the most convenient person to vent her anger upon at that moment. "You're back so late. Why didn't you just stay out all night while you were at it?" the cook said sarcastically. Sara laid her heavy basket of groceries on the table. "Here is everything you wrote down on your list," Sara said mildly. The cook looked over the packages, grumbling. She was in a very bad temper indeed. May I have something to eat?" Sara asked, faint with hunger. "Supper's over and done with," was Cook's answer. "I suppose you expected me to save you a plate and keep it hot for you too?" Sara stood silent for a second. "I have had nothing to eat today but a hot bun," she said. "There's some bread in the pantry. That's all you'll get at this time of night." Sara went and found the bread. It was old and hard and dry, but she ate it as she dragged herself up 3 flights of stairs to her room. She intended to put herself to bed, hoping that sleep would make her forget her rumbling stomach. When Sara finally reached the top landing and paused to rest her wobbly legs once more, she saw a glimmer of light coming from underneath her door. That meant that Ermengarde had managed to slip upstairs to pay her a visit. Sara was glad of the company. The mere presence of plump, comfortable Ermengarde, wrapped against the cold in her red wool shawl, would warm the room and lift her spirits a little. "Oh, you do look tired, Sara," Ermengarde exclaimed as Sara entered the room. "You are quite pale." "I am tired," Sara admitted, dropping onto the lopsided footstool. "I didn't expect to see you tonight, Ermy." "Papa has sent me some more books. There they are," Ermengarde said, pointing unhappily. For a moment, Sara forgot her troubles. "How wonderful! Carlyle's French Revolution. I've been wanting to read this." "I haven't. All these big, fat, difficult books," Ermengarde wailed. "Papa will be so upset if I don't read them all. He'll expect me to know all about them when I go home for the holidays. He'll quiz me on them. Oh, what am I going to do?" "Look here," Sara said excitedly. "If you lend me these books, I will read them for you. I will tell you everything that is in them. I'll teach them to you so that you won't forget anything." "Take them, then." "I wish I wanted them, but I don't. I'm just not interested in them. But my father is, and he thinks I ought to be too." "What are you going to tell your father if he asks you where you have put your new books?" "Oh, he won't ask. He'll think I've read them. He doesn't have to know the truth." "But we would be lying, and lies, well, you see, lies are not only wicked. Lies are vulgar. Sometimes I have thought about doing something wicked, like I might fly into a rage and kill Miss Minchin, you know, when she was scolding and insulting me. But I could never stand being vulgar. Why can't you tell your father that you gave them to me? He wants me to read them. He wants me to know what's in them. But if I can make you remember what is in them by telling you stories that bring the events to life for you, would he be satisfied with that?" "He'll like it if I learn anything in any way," Ermengarde moaned impatiently. "You would, too, if you were my father." Suddenly, both girls froze as they heard Miss Minchin's voice floating up the steps. Sara sprang up from her stool to put out the candle. It was very rare that Miss Minchin came up the last flight of stairs. Sara had known her to do it only once before. But now she seemed to be angry enough to be coming at least part of the way up. It sounded as if she were driving Becky up the stairs in front of her. "You dishonest, thieving child! Cook tells me that food has been found missing from the pantry many times before now, too." "'Tweren't me, Mom," sobbed Becky. "I was hungry enough, sure, But 'tweren't me, never." "Half a meat pie, indeed! You should be sent to prison." "'Tweren't me," wept Becky. "I could have ate a whole one, but I never laid a finger on it." "Don't tell lies. Get in your room this instant, and no dinner or supper for you tomorrow," Miss Minchin yelled as she stomped back downstairs. Sara and Ermengarde heard Becky shut the door of her room and throw herself sobbing upon her bed. Sara could scarcely stand still, but she dared not move until Miss Minchin had retreated and all was still. "That wicked, cruel woman!" Sara burst forth when it was safe to do so. "The cook takes things for herself, for her boyfriend, and then says Becky steals them." "Becky doesn't steal. She's so hungry sometimes that she eats crusts out of the ash barrel. But she doesn't steal." Sara fell to the floor and broke into passionate sobs, her hands pressed hard against her face. Sara was crying, the unconquerable Sara. This was a side of Sara that Ermengarde had never seen before. An awful possibility dawned on her all at once. "Sara," she asked in a timid voice as she relit their candle, "are... You never told me. Please don't think I'm rude for asking, but do you ever go without enough to eat? Do you ever go hungry, like Becky?" It was too much at that moment. The barrier broke down. Sara lifted her face from her hands. "Yes, yes, I do," she cried. "I'm so hungry now that I could almost eat you. And it makes it worse to hear poor Becky crying in there. She's hungrier than I am." Ermengarde gasped. "Oh, Sara, why didn't you tell me?" "I did not want you to know. It would have made me feel like a beggar. It is bad enough to look like one now. I know I do." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do. A little boy once gave me a sixpence for charity." Sara pulled out the sixpence on its ribbon from under the collar of her dress. "He would not have given me his sixpence if I had not looked like I had needed it." Somehow, the sight of the dear gift cheered Sara up, and she started laughing through her tears. "Who was he?" Ermengarde inquired. "One of the large family, the one I call Guy Clarence. I suppose his nursery was crammed with Christmas presents and with baskets full of cakes and sweets. He could see that I had nothing." "Oh, Sara," Ermengarde cried, "what a slow-witted creature I am to not have thought of it before. This very afternoon my aunt sent me a box filled with good things to eat. It's got cakes in it, and buns, and oranges, and figs, and chocolate. I'll creep downstairs to my room and get it this minute, and we'll eat it all now. Go get it, Becky." "Oh, man." "I'll creep down... Actually... This very afternoon my aunt sent me a box filled with good things to eat. It's got cakes in it, and buns, and oranges, and figs, and chocolate. I'll creep downstairs to my room and get it this minute, and we'll eat it all now. Go get Becky." By the time Ermengarde came back, Sara and Becky had done their best to give Sara's room the look and feel of a party. Ermengarde's red shawl served as a tablecloth. Sara had found some old lace handkerchiefs, forgotten in a corner of her now empty trunk, and had laid them around the table to serve as plates and napkins. Some of the red tissue paper that had enveloped the handkerchiefs had been wadded up to look like a fire in the grate. Sara had also found a few silk flowers around an old straw hat. The flowers now adorned the soap dish, which served as a centerpiece for the table. "What a lovely table!" Ermengarde exclaimed as she set down her hamper. "Isn't it nice?" Sara agreed. "Somehow, something always happens just before things get too awful to bear. It is as if some sort of magic transforms things. The worst thing never quite comes. And oh, Miss Ermengarde, wait till Sara's told you what everything is. These aren't just... Oh, please tell her about the banquet hall," Becky begged. And so, as they unpacked the feast from the hamper, Sara began a story in which they were all princesses in a magnificent banquet hall. An enormous fire blazed in the grate, warming the huge room. Torches glinted among the walls, and rich, soft carpets lay everywhere underfoot. Golden plates graced the table, as well as an immense bouquet of flowers displayed in a bowl encrusted with precious gemstones. None of the girls noticed the smiling face of the white turbaned Ram Dass gazing at them from a corner of Sara's skylight, looking down at them like a guardian angel. "Advance, fair damsels, and take your places at the banquet table," Sara said graciously. "My noble father, the king, who was absent on a long journey, has sent word commanding us to feast together in his honor. What ho! There! Minstrels, strike up with your harps and lutes and play sweet music for us. Ah, that's wonderful. And now, let us begin. Sara had just passed around the first plate of cake when they all heard someone coming up the stairs. The girls sprang to their feet and turned pale faces to the door. Listening. There was no mistake about it. Each of them recognized the angry tread mounting the stairs and knew that the end of all good things had come. It's the missus, choked Becky, dropping her piece of cake on the floor. Miss Minchin struck open the door with a blow of her hand. She was pale with rage. My aunt sent me the hamper. We're only having a party, Ermengarde howled. In the middle of the night? A secret party while everyone's sleeping. And you have brought your beautiful new books up into this dirty attic. Take them back to your room, where you shall stay all day tomorrow. I shall write to your father. What would he say if he knew where you were, when you should have been in bed? And here, Miss Minchin concluded as she dumped the feast in a jumbled heap back into the hamper, take this with you. Something in Sara's serious, fixed gaze made Miss Minchin turn to her next. What are you thinking of? She demanded fiercely. Why do you look at me that way? I was wondering what my father would say if he knew where I was tonight. You horrid, unmanageable child! How dare you! Get into bed this instant! And you, she screamed at Becky, go to your room at once! As Becky stumbled from Sara's room, Miss Minchin turned to follow her out. I will leave you to your wonderings, she said sarcastically as she slammed the door behind her. Sara's banquet dream had come to a terrible, nightmarish end. The table was left bare, and the musicians in the gallery had crept away unseen, like mice. Emily was sitting with her back against a wall, staring very hard. Sara picked up her doll with trembling hands. There isn't any banquet left, Emily, and there aren't any princesses. Nothing but prisoners starving in the Bastille. And she sat down on the floor and hid her head against Emily's chest for a long, long time. She always sat like that, hunched over her knees, when she was trying to bear something in silence. Finally, Sara got up and went to bed. I cannot pretend anything else today. There's no use trying. If I go to sleep, perhaps a dream will come and pretend for me. Sara suddenly felt extremely tired because she was so hungry. Suppose there was a bright fire in the grate, with lots of little dancing flames, she murmured. Suppose there was a comfortable chair before it, and a small table with a hot supper on it. And suppose, she yawned as she pulled the thin coverlet up under her chin. Suppose this was a really soft bed, with fleecy blankets and big feather pillows. Suppose, and her weariness felt good to Sara as she closed her eyes and fell fast asleep.